Hello everyone, and welcome to the Ignorant Intellectual on Media. Today I thought we'd do another mixed sale haul because it's piling up on my desk again. It's been a while since my last video. I apologize for that. I usually put out more videos than I am lately in the last couple of weeks. That's because I had throat surgery and I couldn't really talk much. But it's mostly healed. Still doing a bit more healing, but at least I can talk now. So, and all that time, all this media has been piling up on my desk, so I need to put it in its proper place. So I thought I'd do a video today for this, and then we can move on from there. Lots of work and lots of stuff to do as well. So let's see if I can get it all in and still be able to talk. All right, so let's start. I don't know how, just way too many. I'm not even going to count. All right, so let's just get into it. All right, so first thing I picked up was Hunchback of Notre Dame and its sequel. All right, so it's a 3-disc set of Blu-ray, DVD, both Hunchback movies from Disney, and Pocahontas and Pocahontas 2 from Disney, also a 3-disc. So you got the Blu-ray, I guess, and you got the DVD, and you got the third disc as well, right? So, all right, the 2 Disney films I got, I found them each for $4, so that's kind of cool. All right. All right, so we have no room for anything on here. All right, so let's do this. We can get rid of these afterwards. Okay, so I found 2. What I've seen a lot when I watch other people's YouTube videos is people will have like themed T-shirts that they're wearing while they're doing their videos. It's just not a generic shirt. Like I'm having a generic shirt on occasionally. Like I do have some, let's say concert T-shirts or band T-shirts and movie T-shirts and that kind of thing. But I figure, hey, maybe I'll go searching around and see if I can find some of my favorite movies or albums or whatever on a T-shirt, and then I can wear those while I'm doing my videos, right? So it's not a high priority thing or anything. I usually just pop down in the basement and do a video with whatever I'm wearing, right? So, but if I happen to be wearing a themed T-shirt, that would be cool. So I ended up picking up a couple of themed T-shirts over the last couple of weeks. So I thought maybe I'd show you. So it's Cowboy Bebop. All right. So that's probably my all-time favorite anime TV show. It's Cowboy Bebop. So I figured getting a T-shirt of it would be cool. And I also got, what was the other one? Ah, yes. If you watch previous videos, you know that my favorite character in comics growing up was Iron Fist, right? Power Man and Iron Fist comic. The Iron Fist comics before that, before Power Man joined, before Iron Fist joined Power Man to do the comics from Power Man 50, 51, that time period up. I was a really big fan of Iron Fist. I like karate and kung fu movies, and that translated into my comic liking as well, right? So I would collect. I have actually all of them. I found a collector in not far from me actually that had every Iron Fist comic, including the Power Man and Iron Fist stuff. So not the newer stuff because they rebooted Iron Fist later on, but the original run of Iron Fist, I have all the comics for those. But my second favorite character growing up was Moon Knight. So it was cool. I found this T-shirt. So I only have like one Moon Knight comic though. I bought it to give it to my son so I could read it to my son, see if reading comics would get him into reading. But he reads really well for a 6-year-old already, so I don't really have to worry about his reading as much as I taught him to read or whatever, right? So he picked it up really quickly. So all right, so that's the 2 T-shirts. All right, what up's next? Okay, let's do some video games. All right, so I picked up Crash Bandicoot Insane Trilogy. That's the first 3 Crash Bandicoots. All put onto one thing for the Nintendo Switch. So my son and I have played the first one. We haven't played the second or the third one yet. So, and I'm also looking for CTR, Crash Test Racing. That was my favorite like racing game when I used to play video games back in the day. And so they have it actually on Nintendo Switch. So I'm looking for that one as well. And then there's a fourth in this, like this is a trilogy, but there's a fourth one that I'm also looking for. They're fun. They're just running through the jungle or whatever and collecting. I think they're mangoes, collecting mangoes, and once you get 100 mangoes, you get a free man. You start jumping on, bouncing on things. You can do this super spin. That's really cool, and so we're having fun. My son's kind of just learning to play the game, so he does a lot. He tries to jump over these what are they pitfalls in the ground or whatever, and he tries to jump over them, and he ends up jumping right into them. It's kind of funny, but overall, we're having fun with it. So if you have a Nintendo Switch, this is a good one to get. You get 3 games in one, right? All right, so that's the first one. Next one, I got a Captain Toad's Treasure Tracker, another one for my son. So he's played this. I have not watched him play it. He played it for a couple for like just under an hour, I guess, fooling around with it. I'll have to see what it's about because I don't know anything about it right yet. Basically, it's Toad from the Mario world, uh, tracking down treasure, right? So, all right, so that's the second one that I got. I got both of those for $30 each. All right, it's really weird how expensive Nintendo Switch games are. You ever notice that? I mean, compared to other ones, like if you get a PlayStation 5, you can collect all the PlayStation games from PlayStation 1 all the way up to PlayStation 5 and play them on the PlayStation, right? So a whole, huge library is open for you to get. But I got the Switch because of, the portability of it. I thought it would be funner for my son if we were going on a trip or whatever. He'd have the Switch that he could play while he's in the car or whatever. You can't do that with the PlayStation 5, right? So, um, um, but the games on the PlayStation 5, I mean, the newest games are, in the 60, 70, $80 range or whatever, right? But, if you get PlayStation 4 games, you're paying like sometimes under $10 each for them. PlayStation 2, PlayStation 3, they're like $5 each, that kind of thing. But um, when it comes to these Nintendo games, like this is like maybe $45 or $50 new, and it's like 30 used. And a lot of the games are more popular games. All the Mario games, a lot of the Mario games, like new, they're 79.99. Used, they're 65. People are selling them for like pretty much almost the same as new, right? And they're selling. So I see them going up on Kijiji and Facebook Marketplace a lot, and they're selling in the 60 range if they're new for 80, right? So it's kind of interesting how they hold their value, right? Anyway, so that's Toad's Adventure. Now, this one I got as a gift. It's called City Skylines. Now, I was a huge fan back in the day. City Skylines. I was a huge fan back in the day of SimCity, and I just recently picked up Civilization 6. I played that for a bit. I haven't played it since, but um, it's a pale comparison to SimCity. I like Civilization because SimCity hasn't come out with a version in decades, right? There was a pack that you could play on your PC, but even now, that pack that I have, I still have that PC game. I can't play on any of my laptops or computers because I have to figure out a way to go back to like Windows 95 or Windows Millennium or whatever in order for the game to be accepted by the computer or whatever. I can't figure out how to do it. I guess I can go all online and figure it out, but it's a real pain in the ass to do it. I don't know why SimCity just doesn't come out with a new version, right? But if they don't, this one is very, very, very similar, right? And it's a lot of fun to play. I've been playing it on the Nintendo Switch. Um, the only issue with it is this is out of print actually. So if you notice this says 3 down there instead of E, right, for everyone. Because I think this is a European copy because I think they're still producing it out in the UK or whatever, or in Europe. And so um, my daughter got it off of Amazon, and it works. It works on the Switch. So if you're looking for other games that maybe are out of print in the US or Canada, I mean, you can go on Amazon and maybe find some from the UK. Now, if you're going to get it, yeah, get it from the UK. If you get it from France or Germany or something, the language is going to be in French or German, right? And you might be a bit lost, right? So get it from the UK like this one. So and it's fun. The only problem is with with city skylines or um, Sim City or that. It's made for the PC. It's really not made for a video game, right? Because you really have to be precise in your movements when you're creating your city with your roads and your buildings and all that, right? There's some detail that you have to use, and a mouse is very good with that detail, but a joystick isn't. So the biggest frustration with Skylines is um, trying to angle everything the way that you want and using the buttons and the joystick to create, the cityscape that you want, and you're doing it over and over and over and over again, trying to get it perfect, right? And a mouse is so much easier than a joystick with your thumb trying to do that kind of stuff. So I got a bit frustrated and um, stopped playing it. And there's with a mouse, it's just intuitive, right? And usually when you buy a PC game, they have a booklet with it that explains what all how to do everything, right? Where all the menus are, where everything else is. With the Nintendo Switch game, right? All you get is that, right? So there is no booklet inside. There is nothing inside of it. I guess they expect you to go on YouTube or go somewhere else online, and maybe there's an online booklet. I don't know. I haven't searched for it. I have gone on YouTube to take some tutorials with it. I guess that's what they expect you to do with it. But that means you're sitting down, and most of the tutorials for the game are with the PC, not with Nintendo Switch, right? So there's a learning curve on what the buttons do and how to figure out how to, like sometimes you don't want the road to be straight and you don't want it at a 45 or a 90-degree angle. Sometimes you'll need it curved, right? And how do you do a curve in it, right? Or let's say you're going along the coastline and you want to build, a concrete barrier along the coastline. How do you do that, right? So with the mouse, it's a lot easier to do those things than it is with the joystick, right? So, anyways, that's a minor complaint. Once there's a learning curve to every game. Once you get used to the controllers and everything, I think you'll be able to manipulate it a lot easier. I'm just starting out with it. That's why. So, all right. So those are the games that I got. I got Skylines, Captain Toad, and Crash Bandicoot. All right. So those are three more video games. I just picked this up yesterday, which is a nice steelbook of Psycho. Um, I have the film, but I'm always into upgrading, right? So there it is. No booklet or anything inside of it, just this the card for the digital version and the Blu-ray, right? So, um, but it's nice. It doesn't have the J card with it, but I paid $6 for this, $6. So it was a steal. All right. First thing I do is put it in the plastic and get a plastic box to put it in, and we'll do that. All right. So that's Psycho. Variety magazine consider it's the greatest film of all time. I did a video on their 100 best films or whatever, and they rated Psycho as number one. So I thought that was a bit high. All right, next up is the Quran, which is it's a little version of it, right? Um, I don't know if you know what the Quran is, or if you think it's the evilest book on the planet or whatever, but it's basically the main religious book for Islam. And before you think that way, you should actually pick it up and read it. And this is a translation in English, and there's translations all over the place in English if you want to read the Quran. And you can get a supplementary help book with it if you want, or go online. And while you're reading, if you don't understand something, you can get some scholarship online with it as well. Um, I don't think there's anything inherently evil with Islam or whatever. So it's good to know a bit about it before you draw draw conclusions. All right. So that's the Quran. I bought it to resell. The Quran is very easy to resell. All right. Next up after that is Midnight's Children by Salman Rushdie. Most of the books that I show, this is how I finance my movie collection, is because books sell better than movies and other things. And I can usually find books at a reasonable cost where I can sell them for a bit more than I bought them for, and take that money and actually buy, increase my movie collection, right? So this one This is one has probably his. I mean, the Satanic Verses was the one that put him on, the radar of everybody in the world. But this is his best book. All right, no, Satanic Verses isn't. All right. Um, uh, Midnight's Children. This is a book about well, one particular child, but all the children that were born at midnight on the day that India got its independence from Great Britain, from England, right? And uh, Rushdie writes a novel about it where this child or these children have like magical powers because of it. And anyways, it's quite an interesting like fantasy reality type of type of book. And if you haven't read Salman Rushdie, pick this book up. I think you'll enjoy it. All right. All right. Next up after that is one of the great, from 1927, one of the great philosophy books on existentialism, and that's Martin Heidegger's Being and Time. Now, there was a time period in my 20s, in my mid to late 20s, that I got into philosophy, started reading a lot of philosophy. And I picked this book up and I read it, and I did not understand it at all. All right. So, and then I picked up some Hegel and I picked up a lot of the German philosophers. I kind of went from England, then I went over to France, and then I went to Germany. And at Germany, I got stuck. All right. The Germans, with their philosophy, is just like beyond me. I'm not. Uh, I'm humble enough to admit when I've come across a mind that is just either superior than mine or um, is full of shit. I have no idea, but I don't understand Heidegger. I have a difficult time with Hegel. I have a difficult. The only German philosopher that I read, and I read and I understood was Nietzsche, right? So, or Nietzsche, whatever. And his stuff is extremely depressing. So if you are clinically depressed, I would highly suggest you not read Nietzsche. All right, but if you're not, the Egomaniac is really interesting to read and is a lot more accessible than Heidegger or Hegel or others from the country of Germany. This basically is his argument against, who is that French philosopher? Sartre? Was it Sartre? No, it wasn't Sartre. Was it? Who was it? The guy that, I keep confusing them, right? But anyways, he argues against, the if I remember correctly, I might look like an idiot here, but uh, the French philosopher that said, "I think, therefore I am." The only thing that you really know that exists is yourself because you think, right? The rest could all be an illusion. All right. He kind of argues against that. He says, being is, there's no difference. There's not a difference between yourself and your environment. It's one and the same, right? So, and then he goes on from there and he loses me. All right. Now, this copy has been read numerous times. As you can tell, it's like dog-eared and bent and a bit dirty. It's been sold and used and everything. But it's one of the most important philosophy books of all time. Now, when you're reselling books, I've mentioned before that the number one thing isn't the title or the author, all right? It, that's important afterwards. The first thing always, always, always is condition, all right? So the condition of the book is the most important thing. So if you get a reading copy, as they would call, meaning that it's been read numerous times and it's, it looks like this, avoid it. Don't pick it up because you're going to have a difficulty reselling it. People like to buy used books that look like new books, all right? So if you want to sell something quickly, stay away from a book that looks like this. But um, there are certain books, all right? There are certain books that you can pick up and resell as long as you're doing it. Like this book was like probably $30 new, and used the last time it was sold was $16.98. All right, so it was like $17 used, sold at $17, right? Um, so you can see $30 new, 17, $20 used if it's in really nice condition. You can see that if you find the book for like two or three or four or $5 somewhere at a at a garage sale or something, right? You can see how you can resell it and make some money for your movie collection, right? But um, you can resell, even though it's a crap condition book like this, because it's philosophy books are really, really resellable. Our philosophy books are the easiest to resell out of every book, even literature. And the reason why it is because um, they're hard to find, right? And so the copies that are out there in the used market will be sold. So I know I can't sell this if it was 30 new. I can't sell it for 20, but I know I could probably sell this for 5 or 6. All right. So if I pick this up for $1, I can sell it for 5 or 6. Yeah, why not? I know it'll sell quickly, right? So even though it's in bad condition, but not all books are that way. Only the great books, philosophy books, the great books. All right, maybe like 1984, maybe like Brave New World, things like that in literature. Um, uh, in philosophy, you can get away with lower condition books, but not much else, right? Unless it's like really up there when it comes to the book's title, right? All right, so that's Being in Time. If you've read German philosophy and understood it, I bow down to your greatness because it's really hard to understand. All right, next up is another one that isn't in the greatest condition, but better condition than that one. But it is also another one of the great books that will resell very easily, and that's Jung's Memories, Dreams, and Reflections. All right, this is from 1961. He wrote most of this just before he died. In fact, I don't think he finished it all. It's basically a semi-autobiography of all the things that he's learned in his lifetime. He died when he was like 80, in his 80s. And it's a really, really, when people read Jung, this is probably the first book that they go to read. It's really, it's a mind-blowing read if you haven't read it. And, Jung was a disciple and colleague of Freud, and one of the big names in psychology and psychoanalysis, right? So if you haven't read it in Jung, you're missing. All right, you're missing out. All right. So this again is an older copy of it, and it's not in the greatest condition, but I can still sell it for more than I bought it for. So next up is one of Canada's greatest intellectuals. This book came out in 2005, and it's called The Collapse of Globalism and the Reinvention of the World by John Ralston Saul. Now, him and Michael Ignatieff are the two guys that probably sell the best when it comes to thought or thinking, philosophy, current affairs, current events, that kind of thing, in Canada. And this book was put out like 17 years ago, and it was at a time where you saw a reaction to globalism. Everything was going international, and then you saw a fight back from that, and people became more nationalistic than internationalistic, right? And he talks about that and what that holds for the future. So it's a really good read if you haven't read this, and it's good to see how his predictions are working out now, like 15, 20 years later, right? So and it's in beautiful shape. So all right, so that's The Collapse of Globalism. All right, move these out of the way. We have room for some other stuff here. All right, so next up is one of the greatest novels of all time, and this would be one of the novels that um, it's been published since it was put out in 1969, and even those paperback copies that are like 99 cents on the cover, that were put out in the 70s and 80s or whatever, you can still sell those for like $4 or $5, right? So this is a nice trade paperback size um, version of Kurt Vonnegut's Slaughterhouse Five. It's one of the great novels, like up there, top 10 novels of all time, and it's basically about a soldier who goes through the shelling of Dresden during is it one? World War One or World War Two? I was confused the two. Anyways, in Dresden, in France, and basically he ends up getting captured and kidnapped by aliens and brought to a different planet to be put on display underneath a glass globe or whatever, if I remember correctly. And these aliens watch him. All right, and then he makes a makes his way back to Earth, if I remember correctly. Anyways, it's one of those novels that you're not sure what's real and what is fake. Is he suffering from shell shock? Is he suffering from PTSD? And these are all fantasies that he's having, or did it actually happen? Did he actually get captured by aliens? Right? And you're reading it, and it grabs a hold of you, and you don't stop reading until the end. It's one of the great books. So if you haven't read Slaughterhouse Five, do yourself a favor, pick it up and read it. You'll be a Vonnegut fan for the rest of your life. All right. After that is a 1989 novel by Jose Saramago. All right. And he's Venezuelan. I think he's Venezuelan, if I remember correctly. Anyways, he won the Nobel Prize for Literature for his body of work. And this basically is kind of like a fictional version of the Siege of Lisbon, and told through the eyes of a bachelor named Ramudo Silva. All right. I have not read it, but it's good to expand your horizons and read books from, the Latin world, from South America, Central America, Europe, that kind of thing, and not just stick to North American or English books, right? So there's some really good stuff out there, south of the border, right? All right. So next up is 2005's Imperial Ambitions by Noam Chomsky. Actually, this book is basically a radio interview he did with what's his name, David Barsamian. David Barsamian interviews him a bunch of times, and this is his interview on, the ills of America. Let's put it that way. He has very strong opinions on the imperialism of the United States, and if you want to learn about what the U.S. is actually doing rather than what you see on CNN, let's put it that way. Chomsky is one of the guys that you should be reading. All right, and this is one of his better books, and he's very easy to resell, so I picked that up. All right, so if you're ever on TikTok, all right, you'll notice like Jordan Peterson and others they're talking about now. Jordan Peterson has nothing from what I've listened to with his excerpts on TikTok is he doesn't have an issue with gender politics so much so as in whether he will be respectful and use the they them type of pronouns or whatever with a person that is either transitioning or is transmorphic or whatever you want to call a person who doesn't fit into the binary system of gender. All right. What he has a problem with, it seems, mostly is with the government forcing you to use it on penalty of fines or jail time, right? So you can't like compel speech, and I totally agree with him 100%, right? Now, if I come up to a person who identifies as a them or a they or whatever, I'll respect their choices. Like I'm not going to call a person Steve when his name is John. Same thing, same idea, right? So um, but don't expect me to automatically know that, right? So if you look female, I'm going to use the female uh, gender names, and if you look male, I'm going to use the male gender names. So uh, I think it's on the community itself to show some patience or whatever. Some anyways. But if you're of the opinion that gender is binary. There is no other thing to it. All the rest is just propaganda and politics are on TikTok. Then I would suggest maybe you read this book, Between XX and XY by Gerald M. Callahan, PhD. Now I don't know if he has a political agenda behind this book, but basically the book explains to you how that the binary version of gender is actually false. Whether you believe what he says or not is another story. But if you're like me, most people will have like a gut reaction or like a common sense reaction to new things. All right. So I mean, if they're not a fearful type of person and look at everything that is unknown as something to be avoided, hated, or killed, all right, are more of the idea of, well, my first reaction to that is this, but let's see if my reaction is warranted, and then you investigate, right? That's kind of like what my brain kind of functions like, right? So any new type of thing, investigate it, get both sides. So when abortion, transgenderism, all the different issues or whatever that are facing society over the last 50 years or whatever, I have a gut reaction to it. I have a natural reaction to whatever it is, and then I'll investigate that reaction to see whether it's truthful or not, right? Or is it just like sexist or racist or whatever, right? So even if you disagree with what he's espousing in this book, you should still read it and get an idea of what the other side is like, right? I mean, everybody always tells you to walk a mile in another person's shoes. before you judge them, right? So do that. Keep an open mind, read it, and then afterwards, yeah, I understand that, I understand them, but no, no. Then at least you're informed, and your decision to be on whichever side you're on has more merit, right? So, all right. Anyway, so this is between XX and XY, intersexuality and the myth of two sexes. All right, and see what you think afterwards. Let me know. All right. All right. Next up after that is a 1991 book, and this is really great if you're looking. It's called The Passion of the Western Mind. All right, and it's by Richard Tarnas. All right, understanding the ideas help that have shaped our worldview. Basically, if you're starting out and deciding, philosophy, sociology, all the different disciplines of knowledge, since ancient Greece up to now, and you're wondering what books, what moved things forward, what literature did what, and so on and so forth. This is a great book. This will give you an overall. So you read this book, all right, and then afterwards, it'll point you in all the different directions that you need to go to do further reading, and then become what um, universities are supposed to do is make a universal person, a person that is knowledgeable about all subjects, right? So that's what a university was created for, right? So this is kind of like an overview of Western thought and the books that influenced and moved it forward. So when you read it, you're going to go, oh, okay, all right, and then you have a good idea of where to go from there, right? So this is a really good book. It sells well, so I picked it up. All right, so I'm running out of space again. All right, we'll put that one there. All right, next up after that is one of the greatest books of all time, and it's The Origin of Species. It's what started evolutionary biology, basically, and it's Darwin's contribution to science on how species evolve over time through generations because of the process of what he calls natural selection. Basically, as your species evolves over time, it gets rid of things that will kill it. It gets rid of behaviors that will stop it from advancing, and starts to take on characteristics that will help it survive. Right. So an anteater has a long nose because it needs to get into ants' nests or ant hills in order to eat. Right. So its nose may have been shorter earlier in its evolutionary path, but it's gotten longer and longer, right? That kind of idea. So this is what Darwin picked up when he was doing his research and saw things the way that it kind of popped into his head, and then he went with it, and then he ended up writing this. And this is one of the great books of all time, right? So Origin of Species by Charles Darwin. All right. So next up after that is 1001. There's so many of these books. 1001 pieces of music that you have to listen to before you die. 1001 places that you have to go visit before you die, and all that. And there's also 1001 movies you have to see before you die. All right. So, and this actually is an extremely good book. All right. So, if you know very little about film, this book you should pick up because it'll give you an idea. 1,000 movies, yeah, there is 1,000 great movies out there, right? Now I just spoke about Variety's 100 greatest movies of all time, but when you go through that list of 100 movies, you can think of like 10 times that amount of of movies that are out there that could have made that list, right? That's how many great films there are. I mean, cinema has been around for what, over 100 years now, and of that, only 100 of them are great? No, it's thousands. There's millions of films made. Of those, 1,000 would be 1,000th, like 1/100% of all the movies made would make this book or whatever, right? If I'm doing my math correctly. And it's interesting that they put uh, Jack Nicholson on the front. This is his face when he sticks his face through the door after he through the bathroom door when his wife's on the other side, locked behind a bathroom door, and he uses an axe to smash through the door and sticks his head through and goes, "Here, Johnny." Um, it's one of the iconic scenes from film, right? And what do you have on C-3PO on the spine from the Star Wars films, and then you have what that looks like Gone with the Wind, isn't it? That's Gone with the Wind, if I remember correctly. All right, so Um, so it gives you a really good overview of film and what you should watch. And I'm sorry, but it's bang on, right? Here's one Rashomon from Akira Kurosawa, one of his great uh, films, right? He's probably him and what Ozu would probably be the two greatest Japanese directors, and so you'd be watching a lot of their films probably. To Kill a Mockingbird, another great film. Manchurian Candidate, Lolita, Wanda, The Spirit of the Beehive, The Deer Hunter, that Russian roulette scene in Deer Hunter is one of the iconic scenes of all time, right? Anyways, this is a great book. If you want to learn about what films uh, you should watch to get a good idea of great cinema, that is a very good book. All right. All right. What's up next? All right. So let's do this. All right. So we have from 1945, we have George Orwell's The Signet Classic of Animal Farm. If you notice, it's got a bend there, but Animal Farm is another one of those books that I spoke to you about. Even though this one isn't in the greatest of all shape, I can still sell it for $5. So I picked it up, and it's one of the great allegories of all time novellas. Basically about a farm where the animals revolt against the farmer and kill him and take over to make the world to make the farm an equal and free place, right? No hierarchy and all that. It's basically Orwell's um, idea of communism, right? And there's a pig in it named Napoleon who tries to take over. Kind of like Stalin, or whatever, right? So um, it's really interesting read if you haven't read it. That in 1984, the two books that you should read by Orwell, and his essays. You should read his essays, and they're really good as well. All right, next up after that is 1959's Childhood's End. Arthur C. Clarke science fiction book about the invasion of the Earth. Well, more like the overview of the Earth. These aliens called the Protectors. What were they called? Were they called the Protectors or the Guardians? No, the Overlords. All right. They come to Earth during the Cold War to save Earth from the Russians and the Americans blowing up the planet, right? And they kind of take over. They allow humans to go about their regular days and everything, and they just kind of overview it and stop any major war or whatever happens. Then things develop, and it goes on from there. And it turns out that they're there to spur on humanity's evolution into a world mind or whatever. Anyway, so it gets pretty interesting, that book. All right, and if you haven't read it, yeah, you should read it. It's one of the great science fiction novels. And now 1967's The Outsiders. All right, this is S.E. Hinton's first book, a series of 4 books about characters, high school, teenage characters. It's my choice of the greatest, young adult fiction. I read it when I was in high school and I was blown away by it, and I've read it numerous times since. It's basically about 2 social groups. You have a rich group called the Soses, and you have a poor group called the Greasers, and they end up clashing. Um, and one of the Soses end up dying, and the person that killed him is a Greaser, and he ends up, escaping out of the city to go stay at a church. Because he doesn't want to be arrested for murder or whatever, right? Anyways, it's the subject matter is pretty tense. Let's put it that way for a young adult fiction book, and but it's really good. And it was followed by like Tex, and that was then. This is now, and there was a 4th one. Can I remember it? Rumblefish. All right. So those 4 novels, great young adult fiction, and I was quite impressed by them. And this sells really well again. So, all right. Next up is one of the great dystopian sci-fi novels, and that's Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury. All right. This book basically, Fahrenheit 451 is the temperature in which paper burns. All right. And basically, this is about a fireman named Montag who works for the fire department. But the fire department in this futuristic world has nothing to do about putting out fires. They actually start them. There's a book ban in this society where people aren't allowed to read. All right. And what they've gone is basically on a big, huge book burning thing over decades. What are we getting rid of all of the books? All right. And what Montag's job is to search out people who are hoarding or hiding books and finding them and burning them. And he burns your house down at the same time, right? So, and what happens is he starts having a moral dilemma with it. His conscience starts getting the better of him, thinking that maybe there's something wrong with burning books, so he ends up hiding the book himself, and then he ends up meeting this, this group of people who are basically named after books because it's their job to memorize books through memory and pass it on to others, because the actual printed word is illegal. So they do it. They memorize. So each person has a book that they memorize or whatever, right? So and it's quite interesting read if you haven't read it. And it's one of the great dystopian sci-fi fantasy novels, right? So next up is C.S. Lewis's Mere Christianity. See, this is an older book, right? UK $1.25, but it's one of the important books. So I can sell this for like $5. All right, it's a paperback, sell it for $5. Mere Christianity is outside of C.S. Lewis's fiction is probably his most important and most read book, and it basically it's like a four-part book where he goes through Christianity. Like I think I wrote it down. See, part one is his arguments for the existence of God. Part two is his defense of Christian theology. All right. Part three is a primer on Christian ethics, and part four is the Christian's idea or conception of God. All right. So basically, he goes over, the whole, thought and ideology of Christianity, and it's really I mean, even if you're not a Christian, like I said, with the double XXY book or gender dysphoria or binary gender roles, things like that, you should always read the other side, if you know what I mean, to get an idea. So even if you don't believe in God, if you're an atheist, an atheist more than a Christian, I would think, should read stuff on Christianity and get an idea of what Christianity is about, even if you don't believe in it, right? So Mere Christianity would be a book that you would pick up, right? St. Augustine stuff. There's a bunch of Christian literature that is considered great, whether it's Christian or not. It's just great literature, and Mere Christianity would be one of those books. All right. So next up after that is this book was written in the 1600s. It's the Book of the Samurai. It's called Hagakure. All right, and it's basically about a samurai who became a samurai after the samurai were kind of uh, banned or whatever, where they started, fading into the past. And it's his how to live a life of a samurai when there is no war, right? So, and it's a classic. It's a classic of Japanese literature, and it has a lot of insight into it, and it's interesting to learn the ideology or the thought patterns of what makes a great warrior, right? And this is a book that you should turn to if you want to learn about that. All right. All right. After that is Tennessee Williams, one of his great plays from 1944, and that's The Glass Menagerie. All right. It's basically almost like semi-autobiographical about a boy or a young man who's taking care of his mother and his older sister because his father either left or died. I can't remember which. And his sister's a bit of an infirm, and his mother is a bit of a mother, you know what I mean? And she's like trying to marry off her daughter, and she's always pissed off at her son, and it's about him leaving them behind because they're just too toxic or whatever, right? So it's called The Glass Menagerie. It's one of Tennessee's great plays, and you should read it if you haven't read it. All right, so next one is Seamus Heaney. Seamus Heaney is selected poems. He's one of the great poets of the 21st century, all right, from 1966 to 1987. And you can get an overview of his poetry. A lot of people consider him, the greatest poet, post 1950. All right, so if you like poetry, this is a guy you should read. he also did a translation of, is it the Odyssey? I think it was the Odyssey. He translated the Odyssey as well. Did a modern translation of the Odyssey. That's really interesting to read as well. Right? So, um, if you haven't heard of him, now you have. Now you have no excuse if you like poetry to read some Heaney's poetry. That's how you pronounce his name. All right, so this is from 1871. This is called The Coming Race, all right, by Edward Bulwer Lytton. And it's basically a science fiction novel, one of the early science fiction novels about they dig in a mine and they end up finding this whole other society living underground. And it's one of the books that if I explain it to you, it kind of ruins it. So the mystery of it is what is attractive to this. So if you haven't read The Coming Race and you like science fiction books, pick this one up. Now, this one is from what Broadview, the Broadview Press, which is a Canadian imprint, and they do a lot of these academic books of books that are kind of like, some of them are more mainstream that people know, but other volumes that they do are kind of like forgotten great novels or whatever, right? And I don't know if this is one of those or not, but until I picked this up and read this and read the reviews on this, I didn't even know about this book. So The Coming Race, if you haven't heard it, if you're a science fiction fan, uh, pick it up. It's supposed to be really good, right? All right. So next up is Lawrence Durrell's The Alexandria Quartet. It's one of the big, what do you call them? Tetralogies? Is it a tetralogy? Four books? It's actually a trilogy, and then he writes another book afterwards. So it's like three novels about the same time period, written from the point of view of a different character. And then the fourth one afterwards is kind of like what's happened since those three novels, right? So it's kind of like a trilogy, and then a fourth book came along, right? Um, it's read by millions of people, and it's quite interesting, and it's quite thick, and it's quite a lot, and it's quite easy to resell, and that's why I got it. I have not read it myself. I'm not sure if I would be interested in reading the same book three times just from a different perspective, but um, lots of people are interested in that. So I guess he must have taken it and written it really well in order for this to be such a popular book, right? So, all right, so that's the Alexandria Quartet. After that is Erskine Childers' The Riddle of the Sands, a record of the Secret Service. All right, this is a Penguin classic. All right, the newest version of them. All right, it's not in super great shape. Uh, but Penguin classics sell pretty well. So I decided to take a chance and pick it up. Plus, it's pretty interesting. Um, this is basically a spy novel, an espionage novel about these two guys who investigate Germans doing some what would you call it, exploring or digging or whatever on an island just off the coast of Germany. But what it turns into is a plot for the invasion of England. So it's quite interesting. It's one of the earliest espionage or spy books. All right, and a lot of the things that were used in this kind of were copied for later spy novels, right? So um, I don't know how, I haven't read it. So all right, next up is one of the great 19th century novels, and that is Thomas Hardy's Tess of the D'Urbervilles. It's part of the Modern Library Classics collection. All right. The Modern Library has been around since, the turn of the 19th into the 20th century. They've been putting out pocketbook hardcovers for the longest time. There's like over 800 of them, all numbered and everything of all the classic greats in philosophy and literature and so on and so forth, right? So, but then they went into a paperback form like this, and they have a hardcover version of it as well. That's kind of like greenish silver. The dust jackets are greenish silver, but the paperback ones are popular, but they're not as popular as the Penguin Classics or the Oxford World's Classics, but they do sell pretty well. And this is one of the great 19th century novels, and this is about her, Tess, and her life, where, I mean, a lot of shit happens to her. It's just ridiculous. So um, she ends up, the D'Urberville name is a prestigious name in England, and it seems that she's part of the D'Urberville name, and then they end up searching out their rich relatives or whatever, and then one of the D'Urbervilles has a fancy, one of the sons has a fancy for her or whatever, and ends up sexually assaulting her, and then she ends up having a sickly baby who dies. And then she gets involved with another man who doesn't know anything about that past, and then she reveals it to him, and he leaves her, and then she ends up in the poorhouse, and then he comes back um, um, because he's forgiven her for that kind of thing, and then she ends up murdering somebody. Anyways, it's melodramatic to say the least, but it's quite an interesting read if you like 19th century literature. All right. Um, and what comes up after that? All right, let's do Exotica. All right, did I do Exotica already? I think I did this already. It's my all-time favorite Canadian film, directed by Adam McGowan, and the Criterion Collection finally came out with it's numbered 1150 in the collection, and I got this as a gift. All right. Next up after that is the last Sidney Lumet film. It's called Before the Devil Knows You're Dead. This is a very good film. All right. You know, Sidney Lumet is the guy that did what, like Serpico, Dog Day Afternoon. He did his greatest film is probably 12 Angry Men, you know, the film from the 50s, 1957, if I remember correctly, you know, about the jurors deciding the fate of a black man in a murder trial, right? And well, it was an extremely good film, one of the greatest films of all time. And this one isn't bad either. This is about two brothers where the older brother convinces the younger brother to rob his parents' jewelry store in order to get a few $100,000 so that he can take his wife, who's Marissa Tomei, to Brazil to live because she's happier in Brazil than she is in the United States, right? And it all shit hits the fan. It goes all wrong, right? And the aftermath of it's quite Ethan Hawke and Philip Seymour Hoffman and Marissa Tomei star and Philip Seymour Hoffman. Too bad the man is dead because does he remind you of Orson Welles? Does he have that Orson Welles um, persona about him or about him? Because his acting is extremely good. All right, and Ethan Hawke does a really good job as his bumbling younger brother as well. Right, so very good film if you haven't seen it. And it came out in 2007, and I think it's Sidney Lumet's last film. All right, so I didn't have it in my collection, so I did it. All right, so next up is I found this for a really cheap price, The New Mutants. And when I was collecting comics back in my teens, The New Mutants came out. There was a graphic novel, part of the Marvel graphic novel, the first set of graphic novels that Marvel came out with back in, you know, number one was it the death of Captain Marvel, if I remember correctly, and there was an X-Men one in that series as well. I don't know how many. I think they got up to 40 of them. I think, but anyways, one of them was The New Mutants, and I guess they took that graphic novel and made this film about that graphic novel, but it's not very good. All right, it's Blu-ray 4K, so I picked it up because it was cheap, and I don't think I'm going to add it to my collection. I think I'm going to try to resell it because I didn't like the film I watched. I didn't like it very much. All right. Next up is The Three Faces of Eve. All right. So this is a film um, I picked up DVD because it's part of the Fox Studio Classics. It's number 23. All right. So now I'm getting close to. I'm almost at half of all because there's 40 of them in this collection, and I think I've got about half of them so far. So I think this may be my 20th, 18th, 19th, 20th of it. But whenever I find a new one that I haven't seen, that I haven't had to my collection, I will add it. And then once I get all 40, I'll make a display of them. Right. So this one is based on the Colbert H. Thigpen novel of the same name, Three Faces of Eve, following a fascinating story of a deeply troubled young Southern housewife suffering from headaches, emotional upset, and forgetfulness. Eve White sees a psychiatrist, and so on and so forth. But anyway, so it's supposed to be a pretty good film, and it won the Academy Award in 1957. All right. Next up is Ichi the Killer, Episode Zero. Basically, Ichi the Killer is a Takeshi Miike film about the Yakuza, and this one guy. Um, his name isn't Ichi, but he's like an enforcer for the Yakuza. Basically, this is an anime um, film based on that world or whatever. They made a film of it. I can't remember if this came first and then they made the film, or they made the film and then they came out with this. But this is a bloody piece of work, and so is the Miike film. So if you like blood and guts and craziness, you'll like the Cheetah Killer. Next up to that is Roger Corman's cult classic, Dangerous Dames. Swamp women, she gods of Shark Reef, and wasp women. Basically, Corman is the king of the B movie, and I found this for like $2, so I decided to pick it up. See what these films from 1950s and 60s are about. All right. Next up after that is the Oscars Club, the pre-code comedies collection, Through Thin and Thicket. All right. So this is a pre-code before Hollywood got a code where they couldn't show like criminals being successful. They always have to be arrested by the end of the film, and there's certain restrictions on nudity, and like you couldn't show a married couple in the same bed. They'd have to sleep in separate beds when you show in the bedroom, and all these other codes that came about in Hollywood to clean up the cinema, right? And this is a film that came before that, all right? I think there's a group of them because it's called the Maskers Club, the pre-code comedies collection. And this is, does this have more than one film? Yeah, it has Through Thick and Thicket, and Wide Open Spaces, Lost in Limehouse, The Moonshiner's Daughter, and Stolen by Gypsy. So 5 films on one DVD. So you can probably imagine how clear they're going to be, right? But again, I found it for $2. So next up after that is William Powell and Jean Harlow in Reckless, Warner Brothers classic film, right? So this one is directed by Victor Fleming, so I picked this one up. I haven't seen it yet. After that is probably Romero's best film, which is Dawn of the Dead. So we had The Night of the Living Dead is probably the one that people will mention the most because it's the first one that kind of started the whole zombie genre of horror. But this one is the second one in the series, and this one I think is even better than the first one. But what's funny about this is probably Romero's greatest film, zombie film, but I like the remake better with Sarah Polley. And I don't know why. Just Sarah Polley has that magnetism on screen, and that film. I think it's because I watched the remake from 2000 with Sarah Polley in it before I watched this one, and then I watched this one, and this one is from what is it, 77 or something, 78, from 1978. So the updated version, yeah. But this is an extremely good zombie film as well. So if you haven't seen it, what are you waiting for? All right. Next up is best film, top 3 anyways. So Stanley Kubrick's a Clockwork Orange. All right. So I have this already on Blu-ray. So I picked up these because it was a package for some other films that I didn't have, and he wouldn't sell me the whole thing, and it was really really cheap. So I got these for a steal. So I'm just going to resell them for like $3 or whatever, right? I usually can do it. So this is a 2-disc special edition of A Clockwork Orange. If you have not seen A Clockwork Orange, watch it. It's based on the novel of the same name by, who wrote it? If it pops into my head, I'll tell you, or I'll just list it here. And basically, it's about a futuristic world where Malcolm McDowell has a gang. There's 4 guys that go around, terrorize the city, break into people's houses, and rape their women, and all this other kind of stuff. And he ends up finally getting captured and arrested, and he's going through a psychological detraining program where they show him violent stuff on the film and make sure his eyes stay open and give him this drug that makes him feel upset to his stomach. So it's kind of like a conditioning thing to make him so he won't be a criminal. It's intellectually, it's quite a interesting film to watch, just for its. I wonder if that would work, kind of thing. It's like a cure for criminality, right? But it's pretty brutal. Let's put it that way. This one, now with I keep referring to that list. They had a Kubrick film. I think they had Lolita in the top 100 variety, but the highest one they had was 2001: A Space Odyssey. But this is better than 2001: A Space Odyssey, and so is Full Metal Jacket. If you haven't seen that film, that's probably my pick for the greatest war film of all time. Full Metal Jacket. That's better than 2001: A Space Odyssey as well. But all of Kubrick's films are really good. If you haven't seen A Clockwork Orange, pick it up. You may stumble on the language because it's whoever wrote the book. I can't remember his name. Anthony Burgess. All right. So when Burgess made the book, he created a new language, which is basically a mixing of Russian slang with English um, words. So it's kind of like a mix of Russian and English. Um, and so in the book, they actually have a glossary at the end that explains what some of the words mean. But obviously, in the film, you won't have that, right? So you've got to kind of use your intuition on what some of the words that they're saying is, and sometimes that's put offish by people who first watch the film. What the hell is that guy saying? You know, that kind of thing. But if you, uh, I would suggest read the book, and then you'll get the language down, and then when you watch the film, you'll even enjoy the film even more, right? So, anyways, so that's uh, Clockwork Orange. All right, next up is the final cut of Blade Runner, another film that I already have. So I'll just resell this one. But Blade Runner is probably in my list of top films. This would probably be number one. This is probably my all-time favorite film. Right? So um, it basically tells about a future world where he is a Blade Runner or a person that works for as a police officer that hunts down renegade androids who have come to Earth illegally because they're slaves in the outer world, the other worlds off planet, and there's a group of them that come to Earth because their lifespan is like 5 years or whatever, and they want to extend their lifespan. And Rutger Hauer plays the main guy, and he goes about trying to figure out how to extend his life. And Harrison Ford hunts him down or whatever, right? So it's a really really good film. Now, when it first came out, if you weren't around at that time, it actually didn't do all that well. And the reason why it didn't do all that well was because it was like during the time where Harrison Ford was doing, Star Wars and the Indiana Jones films, right, where he's either a swashbuckling hero on Earth or he's a swashbuckling hero in space. And this one is a space film, so they thought he would be a similar character, to a Han Solo, and it's nothing like that. It's more of a cerebral type of film, and it's such a beautiful film if you ever watch it. And Vangelis's soundtrack to it, just one of the greatest soundtracks of all time, and the whole aesthetic of the film is just great. And Ridley Scott just did a beautiful job. And if you haven't seen that film, all right. So what's up after that? The Devil, probably, which is a Robert Bresson film. Now he's one of the greatest French directors of all time, and I have not seen any of his films. All right. So this one I don't have in my collection. I have other Bresson films in my collection I haven't seen yet. So when I saw this one, I had to pick it up, but I haven't watched it. All right. After that is A Virgin Suicides. This one is probably Sofia Coppola's best film. All right. And this is about a group of sisters who end up, beautiful sisters who end up committing suicide one after the other. When I watched it, I was blown away with it. But now that it's been however many years, got to been like 20 years since I've seen this, I don't recall the twist and the turns in it that grabbed a hold of you for this film, but there is. And, so if you haven't seen it, I would not shy away from it. All right. Then you got The Wicker Man, one of would you call that a B movie? I don't know. One of the horror films that I've seen. I wasn't really impressed with it, but it's got this cult following to it, right? After that is Todd Browning's Freaks, which is kind of this film would never be made today. It's from the 1930s, if I remember correctly, and it basically shows a lot of the, if you ever went to the circus, and they would have the side show where you walk into the tents and see the man with three arms or the bearded lady or whatever, those kind of freaks of nature or whatever they quote unquote call them. Well, that kind of puts those on film, and I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing depending on how it's put forth. But I know that this film probably would not be able to be made today, and I did watch it back when I was a teen or whatever, but it's been 40 years since I've seen this film, so that just came with the other collection of the films so I'll just resell it. And last but not least are all the Criterions that I've collected since the last couple of weeks. All right, so we have a Tarkovsky film called Mirror. All right, we have I'm going to brutalize his name, but Andrzej Wajda, 3 war films. All right. So this is a collection of 3 war films on DVD box set. All right. From the 1950s. All right. It's all, he's Polish, so it all takes place in Warsaw, these 3 films. I read the write-up of them because I haven't watched them yet, and the write-ups are really interesting, especially the second film in it where they're in the sewers in Warsaw trying to escape the Nazis or whatever, and that is, it was like a war of attrition underground, you know what I mean? Like, people are being left behind, and anyways, next up is Valerie and her Week of Wonders, all right? This one, I should say the name, number 761. These ones are 285, 284, and 283. And this one is number 1084. All right. Blowout, Brian De Palma film. All right. This one is number 562. And you got the Terry Gilliam film, Brazil, number 51. Then we got Eyes Without a Face. This is number 260. And then we have the last 2, which is White Material, which is number are you 560 and 1041, which is The Comfort of Strangers. All right, so these 2 I got for trading. I traded $40 worth of stuff to get these 2 films. So those are $20 each. This one I picked up for $3. Again, $3. Again, $3. All right. They were at a thrift store, and I found them at a thrift store. This trilogy I picked up for, I think it was $30, if I remember correctly. And again, this one and this one I picked up for $3 each. So I went into a thrift store looking through their DVDs, and bang, somebody probably dropped off all their collection of DVDs because they had a bunch of really good films, but most of those films I had, but they had a bunch of Criterions, like 6 or 7 Criterions in there. I picked all 6 of them up, whether I had them or not, because they're very easy to resell. And I was getting them for $3 each. You can sell a Criterion DVD. If it's not out of print, you can sell it for, $15, $20. If it is out of print, you can sell it for more if you really like price gouging people, which I don't. So I'll check to see if it's out of print or not. But the thing about it is okay, my suggestion to you, if you collect films and Criterions, is never pay a out of print price for a Criterion where you see the DVD, they're no longer producing it, and there's no Blu-ray for it, and then they have it on eBay or something for $60. Don't buy it, okay? Because you know what's going to happen, right? You're going to either find it someplace, if you go around searching like I do, at a thrift store or at a private sale for a more reasonable cost than that. Or what Criterion will end up doing is end up reissuing it either on DVD or, they'll upgrade it to a Blu-ray or something, right? And then they'll put it out on DVD and Blu-ray. And now it's back in print, and you just paid $60 for something. Now you look on eBay and it's 15 or 20, right? So anything that's out of print, it's different when it comes to, let's say, a comic or, a baseball card or something like that, because you can't really reprint it, and the reprint won't be considered the same as the actual card that was originally, right, or the comic book, whatever. The reprint never replaces it. But in film, a reprint will always replace the original. It will kill the price of the original. So Criterion put out a movie, let's say in the 1990s, on DVD, and now it's 2020, and that film is out of print. Well, the DVD that they put out is going to be of better quality than the one that they put out in 1990 when they do re-put it out, if they do, right? And they'll usually coincide that with an upgrade to a Blu-ray or a 4K, right? So anything that's out of print, they will eventually, usually not all the time, but will upgrade it if it's added on a DVD, unless the title is just doesn't sell at all or whatever, right? You'll see the upgrades all the time from DVD up to Blu-ray, and this DVD was out of print for like 5 years, and then they upgraded it to a Blu-ray, right? And nobody wants DVD anymore because now there's a Blu-ray. So it's not like they hold their value when they come into print again, right? It's not like when they come into print, the DVD that came out later is worth less than the DVD that came out earlier, unlike, let's say, a baseball card or a comic book. When they put out a reprint of a comic book, that reprint never replaces the original comic book. It's the original comic book that you want. But when it's a movie, when they put out the DVD and then they put out a DVD 10 years later, well, that DVD is going to be, maybe it's a 4K scan of it on DVD, right? And they compress it, but the quality of it will look a lot better than the one that was originally put out. So people will want the remake of it or the reissue of it more than the original, right? So never pay high prices for out of print films, all right? Unless you really, 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 really want to watch that film, and it's the only way that you can get that film, and you want to watch it now. And I'm all for if you want to blow your money on it, it's your money to blow, right? But if you're going to buy it, just add it to your collection, and you'll go around and see it at some point, and you have like 50 or 100 or 200 movies to see, so you know it's going to be sitting on the shelf for a while. Don't pay $60 for an out-of-print Criterion on DVD or whatever. Wait. Um, you'll find it on DVD at a cheaper price at some point, or they're going to reissue half the stuff on Blu-ray, and then that DVD is no longer wanted, right? So it's not like when you spend that $60 is going to hold. It's not going to hold. Eventually it's going to be worth less and less and less money, right? So don't spend a lot of money on films because they're out of print. It's a fallacy. It's a way to lose a lot of your money, right? All right. Anyway, so that's it. So that's everything. That's all the books, movies, video games. Not too many CDs lately. Yeah, I haven't really been able to find anything that I don't already have. And the thing about CDs is they have a price ceiling to them that unless I can find a bulk purchase of them where I get them really cheap, they're not really worth buying to resell because the price you buy them for is almost the same as the price that you can sell them for in the secondary market. So you're not going to see a lot of CDs in a lot of these hauls or whatever because of that, unless I'm adding that CD because I don't have it in my collection, kind of thing, right? All right. All right. So that's everything. I hope you enjoyed it, and you guys have a great day, and I'll talk to you in my next video. And my throat survived, so it's good. All right. If you hit the like button if you like the video, and think about subscribing, and I'll talk to you in my next video. All right. And bye for now.